Private space travel was once a dream, but now it's a reality and a growing concern. Companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin have made space more accessible to civilians and wealthy tourists. However, behind the thrilling launches, several red flags are prompting US officials to consider tough restrictions. Safety, regulation gaps, environmental impacts, and national security risks are all sparking serious federal discussions. With spaceports multiplying and launches becoming frequent, the US might soon draw a legal line. These aren't just harmless rocket rides, they involve high-speed vehicles flying through partially unregulated skies. Unlike NASA, private companies don't operate under the same strict safety oversight or governmental mission goals. This freedom has led to an increase in close calls and emergency landings during tourist-oriented missions. In some cases, private rockets have come dangerously close to passenger airspace and international flight corridors. These incidents triggered alarm bells within the Federal Aviation Administration and national air safety boards. Currently, private space flights are considered experimental, meaning they bypass many traditional aviation safety protocols. There are no mandatory ejection systems or escape capsules for passengers in case of catastrophic failure. If a rocket explodes or veers off course, lives are entirely in the hands of unregulated corporate risk. Recent high-profile launch failures have further intensified calls for stricter government intervention in the space sector. Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin had a booster failure that sent a capsule plummeting without human passengers. Although nobody was hurt, the implications were chilling. What if tourists had been aboard that flight? SpaceX, too, has faced several rocket malfunctions, with engines misfiring or entire stages failing mid-ascent. These near misses have prompted lawmakers to consider stricter standards for commercial human spaceflight. In 2004, Congress passed the Commercial Space Launch Amendments Act to promote private innovation. But it also imposed a learning period, restricting the FAA from implementing safety regulations for passengers. This was meant to allow the industry to grow without heavy regulation, encouraging experimentation and progress. That learning period has been extended multiple times, but now it's nearing its final expiration date. By October 2025, unless extended again, the FAA can finally impose comprehensive safety standards. And some government officials argue that this is the perfect moment to do just that or go further. Concerns go beyond passenger safety. Environmental damage from rocket launches is another hot-button issue. Each launch burns thousands of gallons of fuel, releasing soot and chemicals into the upper atmosphere. Unlike cars or airplanes, rockets release emissions directly into the stratosphere and mesosphere, where they linger. Black carbon particles from rocket launches don't disperse quickly. They trap heat and damage the ozone layer. Scientists warn that frequent launches could drastically alter the Earth's atmospheric balance within decades. Private companies aren't required to report or limit their emissions like other major polluters in aviation. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency is considering whether rocket emissions should face strict regulation. Meanwhile, the Department of Defense has raised alarms about how space traffic is monitored and controlled. With more private companies launching satellites and missions, the risk of orbital collisions increases dramatically. Some satellites have already come within meters of crashing into each other, a catastrophic scenario if realized. If just one rocket collides with another satellite, it could create debris fields that threaten the entire orbit. This hypothetical disaster is known as the Kessler syndrome, a cascading chain reaction of satellite destruction. Even NASA has raised concerns that unregulated private launches could jeopardize national space assets. Military satellites and international communications could be affected by careless or mismanaged private flights. There's also concern about foreign ownership or funding of private US-based spaceflight companies. What if a foreign adversary gained access to advanced space travel infrastructure through corporate loopholes? Congress is now discussing new security screening protocols for space company investments and partnerships. Some argue that private space travel should be treated like nuclear tech, sensitive, powerful, and potentially dangerous. Beyond that, labor unions and civil rights advocates worry about the workers behind these flashy private launches. Engineers and technicians often work long hours in hazardous conditions to meet tight launch deadlines. When accidents happen, there's little oversight or protection for the ground crew, unlike in government programs. Injury reports are difficult to obtain, and compensation claims can get tied up in corporate legal battles. There's a growing push for OSHA and other labor regulators to step in and monitor private space operations. Insurance companies are also watching closely, as liability for space tourism remains legally unclear. If a tourist dies during launch, who's responsible? The launch provider, the manufacturer, or the FAA? Currently, all passengers must sign waivers acknowledging the high risk of death during these flights. But legal experts warn those waivers might not hold up in court if disaster strikes. Families could sue, and the government might be forced to step in financially or politically. As more celebrities and billionaires board these flights, the political stakes get higher with every launch. Public perception could turn quickly if a high-profile accident occurs during a live-streamed space journey. This risk could pressure Congress to act swiftly before a tragedy undermines confidence in space tourism. There's also the issue of inequality. Should only the ultra-wealthy have access to space exploration? Some critics say the industry is fueling a cosmic class divide, where billionaires escape while Earth suffers. Meanwhile, NASA continues to rely on private companies for essential cargo and crew missions to the ISS. This public-private partnership blurs the line between commercial goals and national responsibilities in space. If one of these companies fails, it could impact America's ability to access orbit altogether. For example, if SpaceX grounded its fleet tomorrow, NASA would lose its primary means of reaching space. That's why federal officials are quietly debating whether the government should resume building and operating its rockets. Such a move would reduce reliance on volatile startups and refocus control over space travel outcomes. At the same time, international competition is heating up, especially from China and India. China has successfully launched space stations, moon probes, and commercial missions using state-controlled infrastructure. India recently landed a probe near the moon's south pole, proving their growing technical capabilities. US policymakers worry that inconsistent private sector regulation could lead to American vulnerabilities in the new space race. If safety problems or economic crashes hit private companies, America could fall behind its global rivals. To avoid this, some suggest nationalizing key aspects of space infrastructure to ensure strategic consistency. Others propose creating a new federal agency focused solely on space commerce, safety, and environmental impact. This agency could unify standards across all private launches and coordinate efforts with NASA and the Pentagon. With ballooning launch schedules, the current FAA office can barely keep up with mission applications. More than 120 private launches are expected annually by 2027, posing a major regulatory challenge. Some experts believe we're nearing a tipping point where private spaceflight needs the same scrutiny as aviation. There are also ethical dilemmas around future missions involving lunar mining or Martian colonization. Who gets to claim ownership of moon resources, and how will disputes be handled legally? Currently, treaties prohibit national claims in space, but there's little precedent for private company activity. Elon Musk has stated his goal of colonizing Mars, which raises serious legal and humanitarian questions. If something goes wrong on Mars, do Earth laws still apply, or will corporations set their own rules? Such scenarios have experts calling for updated international space laws before colonization begins in earnest. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Climate activists are urging governments to prioritize environmental justice over space tourism. They argue that Earth's crises, from rising seas to mass extinctions, need investment more urgently than zero-gravity vacations. Taxpayers may begin questioning why billionaires receive public support while basic services struggle on the ground. A rising political movement is forming around this theme, demanding equity and climate-first policies in tech sectors. That could translate into new congressional bills that severely limit or ban non-essential private space flights. If passed, these bills could restrict launches that don't serve research, defense, or planetary protection. We might soon see laws that require all private launches to demonstrate a clear scientific or strategic benefit. This would effectively end joyrides to orbit and rein in speculative tourism businesses. In that scenario, space travel could return to its roots, reserved for astronauts and research missions only. Whether that's a regression or a correction depends on how the next few years unfold politically. But one thing is clear: private spaceflight's golden era might soon face its toughest mission yet. The US government is watching, and if concerns keep piling up, restrictions are no longer just possible. They're likely.